Trent explorers back there, which was no, it was a good bar. So. Okay. So good evening, everyone. It's nice to see so many explorers and guests that have braved the really ugly weather to come tonight. Welcome to the first session of the inaugural Global Conservation Forum at the Explorers Club. Yay. This event marks a significant stride towards shaping a strong conservation and sustainability profile for the Explorers Club, becoming an integral facet of our identity. It is the future of exploration, illuminating the intricacies of our species' survival on Earth. Join us to dive into the future of exploration, gaining valuable insights into the natural processes of our planet and the profound impact our actions have on our collective destiny. So I'm Bonnie Wiper. I'm a member of the Explorers Club, a member of the Conservation and Sustainability Committee, and a representative to the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which you're going to hear a little bit more about later this evening. Before I begin, we have a tradition here at the club. How many people have never been to the club before that are here in the audience? Oh, great. Well, so keep coming back. It's a great place. We have wonderful and sort of quirky lectures on Monday where you'll find information and learn about things that you can't find anyplace else in New York. And those are open to the public. We have an Oceans Week in June, which thousands of people come to. And we have a Climate Week in September, plus lots of other activities. So stay in touch, come to the club, enjoy it. We enjoy having you here. Before I begin, I have one more, well, it's not one more, actually, that's a lie. But I have a task that I'm very pleased to perform, which is to thank the wonderful Conservation and Sustainability Committee, Martin Kraus and Natalie Cash, who did this beautiful poster, co-chairs, Brandy DeCarly, who, if any of you saw our Facebook page today, did 2 beautiful videos for it, and the inimitable Satish Venkatesh, who couldn't be with us today because he is out in the bush in Sri Lanka studying elephants. So we are on a mission to ignite passion and action among our members here at the Explorers Club through captivating stories of research, projects, and individual experiences. We will highlight the urgency and potential of conservation and sustainability for the club and its members. Through education and outreach, we aim to keep our members informed about the latest concepts, policies, and practices, and demonstrate the monumental gains achievable for us through the successful conservation of biodiversity. A special thanks now to Richard Garriott, our president, and Will Roseman, our executive director, without whose endorsement this would never have happened. And to the incomparable staff at the Explorers Club who worked with me on this. Kevin Murphy, our program director, Felix Freeland, who works, actually Felix is back there, who works on a lot of different projects in the club, and Jenna O'Connor, our never not smiling director of catering and outside events. And a special call out to, yeah, she's great. A special call out to Joseph Yoon, the world's the world's biggest ambassador for delicious insect dining. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tracy Farrell, IUCN Director of North America. Tracy has 20 years of experience developing, leading, and overseeing global conservation and sustainable development initiatives and programs around the world. She has a PhD from Virginia Tech in forestry with additional technical and policy experience in freshwater and ecosystem services, protected areas, biodiversity conservation, and conservation finance. Prior to joining the IUCN, she was with Conservation International for 16 years, where she designed and oversaw CI's first global freshwater and ecosystem services program, led the Greater Mekong program for CI's regional office based in Cambodia, and designed and implemented CI's Asia-Pacific conservation and fundraising strategy. Most recently, she created and has been leading a team tasked with enhancing project design and delivery excellence across a portfolio of the highest dollar and most complex public and private sector projects valued at over 500 million USD. Welcome, Tracy. So you should do some fundraising for us.
Thank you. Actually, that just makes me feel old, but which is true. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you so much to the Explorers Club. It's really excellent to be here, and super excited that the Explorers Club is a member now of IUCN, and I'm also personally a member of the Explorers Club. So I'm very happy to be wearing both of those hats tonight. And welcome again, everyone, to the first inaugural Global Conservation Forum. It's very cool. Congratulations, Bonnie, and to the Conservation and Sustainability Committee. Yes, that's worth a round of applause. and it's really a good time, and this is, the conservation crises are ever present. We have the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change, but a lot of positive momentum. And I think that these lecture series really help introduce and inspire a bit of hope. We don't need to be all about doom and gloom. I think we have enough of that, perhaps in our daily lives and watching the news and such, but I think these lectures and many more future global conservation forums will help us come together and really learn from each other. So tonight, though, we're covering the new frontier in conservation. So this is all about innovation. So we're going to get into what does that mean in the conservation space? What is innovation? How do we know it when we see it? How can we facilitate the enabling conditions for it? And what are successful examples that are live time? So you'll get to touch and feel a few of those tonight. So we've got some great speakers lined up whom I'll introduce in a minute. But just to say that we've really come a long way in the field of conservation. We started many years ago, a bunch of sort of scared biologists kind of crackling around the planet, finding really cool species and critters, and then we moved into ecology, which is more about systems and trying to understand how things fit together. And now we're at the point where we have these really cool things like facial recognition software. What? And that's really cool. So you can basically take a smartphone, you can be at a seaport, an airport, something comes across, you're an official, you don't know what you're looking at. It comes in a crate, you open the crate. Well, is this endangered or not? Take a picture, yes it is. So these are just some of the small examples of things. And we also have what's called environment DNA. So this is kind of one of my favorites because it's the idea that you can take a test tube, go into a lake, go into a river, fill it up, send it to the lab. And it'll tell you what's in there or what isn't. And that might sound like, big deal, but that's huge because in the past we had to do these exhaustive, very expensive surveys, lots of analysis on the ground, hundreds if not millions of dollars spent to maybe come up with, we think there's something there, but we're not sure. So the technology and the innovation is really, it's truly revolutionary. And then also consider that that we've really got a lot of technology and things with spatial planning. So the fact now that you can see the smallest area from space, that's amazing. When I first got into this field, we were still using DOS-based systems for geographic information system and trying to painfully draw a little line around a map. And now we're able to have free access to software. So anyone can go online and you can ask cool questions like, if we're going to get to the pathway for 30% of the planet protected by 2030, which is a global goal, what does that look like? Where are the places on Earth? Where are the freshwater places, the marine places, the terrestrial places? And draw your own lines on a map. Ask your own questions. So this is a lot of what we're going to hear about tonight. And just a bit about my organization, and thank you, Bonnie, for my bio. So I'm from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which is a membership-based organization. And what we do is we bring people together to try and solve conservation problems. So we have some 1,500 members globally that are states, so governments can join, NGOs can join, indigenous peoples organizations can join, and they tell the rest of the union what to do. So the members determine the program of work, the members decide the priorities, and then the rest of the union implements. So my piece of it as the doers is only one part. In addition to the members, we have commissions. So we have 7 voluntary commissions of some 18,000 people, which is huge. And they're all volunteers and experts in their own right who care about a certain topic, and they join a commission that aligns with their expertise. So those people really drive a lot of the best practice and quality control of what the union does. And there are so many members on the panel as well. I'm very excited about that. And so members of IUCN, but also commission members. So that's great to see. Then just to say that we believe that innovation and conservation excellence go hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other. And we house a lot of this global expertise. So please reach out to me if you're interested in a certain topic. I'm sure we can find a connection for you. And as I mentioned, we're super happy to be more connected to the Explorers Club, and we want to do more and more of these events. So if you have topics that you're interested in, please let Bonnie or I know, because I think we'd love to explore those with you. So there's a lot of work to do in the conservation space, and it can seem really daunting, but I really do see a light of hope in this idea of innovation and technology and how we can apply the best of our creativity, our innovation, and novelty to address key challenges. So with that, I'll end my opening remarks, and then we can gear up for the panel. But thank you so much for attending, and it's a full audience. That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, so moving to the panel, we're going to have a very cool discussion here. First, we're going to have some stage setting on this bigger topic of what is innovation and why it's important and how technology fits in. And we're also going to have some really great live-time examples. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our first speaker to come up. Her name is Dr. Arsam Pathak. She's the Senior Adaptation and Coastal Resilience Specialist for the National Wildlife Federation's South Central region. Her work focuses on advancing science-based climate adaptation and resilience to protect coastal communities and ecosystems throughout the Gulf Coast from the impacts of climate change and associated extreme events. She's co-authored several publications on climate change impacts and adaptation, including one that I meant to borrow of, but I forgot to read my own remarks, called the Innovation and Climate Adaptation Guide, which was a project with National Wildlife Federation, IUCN, and many others. So before joining NWF, Dr. Pathak received her PhD in environmental science and policy at the University of South Florida, where she researched and published on climate impacts and adaptation decision-making in small islands using a systems approach. So I'll welcome you to the podium, Dr. Pathak.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight and joining us on this very important discussion that we are having today. So let me tell you a little bit more about National Wildlife Federation for those who might be a little unfamiliar. NWF is one of the largest conservation organization in the country. We have been working for decades on biodiversity conservation, climate adaptation, advancing science, policy, and research to support the policy issues around the conservation of species as well as the ecosystems. More recently, we started seeing a lot more of the term innovation in our work, but there was a gap of understanding a proper theoretical framework or guidance around the term and how do we apply it to the field. So the work that I'm sharing today, this guidebook called Innovation in Climate Adaptation, harnessing innovation for effective biodiversity and ecosystem conservation, that is an attempt to fill the gap and providing some guidance on what really innovation is, what the barriers are, and how do we make our field more innovative. This work resulted from a work group and benefited from the expertise of a range of key and diverse members that included folks from academia, but also nonprofits and other federal agencies nationally, as well as from international experts. So moving on. Climate change, particularly increasing temperatures, sea level rise, they are posing growing risks to biodiversity and ecosystems. We have seen wildfires in California. We've seen a lot more flooding in New York. And then from Texas, where I am from, we have been in the longest drought of the century. And these impacts, they're not just posing a risk to the human systems, but also our natural systems, from our wetlands to our marshes to our forests. They're being destroyed and destructed by these impacts, as well as impacting the biodiversity that thrives in these systems. Climate change is also compromising the effectiveness of conventional conservation approaches. So our guidance, we evaluated a range of research that's published on conservation approaches, and what we were finding was a lot of these research articles, they were providing very generic recommendations. So increasing more habitat connectivity or a need for increase in monitoring. And there was lack of more out-of-the-box creative thinking in the recommendations for conservation management. A lot of the specific recommendations were still focused on traditional business-as-usual way of doing things. So building more seawalls for flood mitigation. And this is one of my favorite slides. But I do want to mention that relying on these existing approaches, it's not inherently bad, right? Sometimes you're hungry, you go to your fridge, you get what you can find quick and easy, right? You eat the cheese, you get the carrots, you drink some milk. But then other times, you're so hungry that you want to mix and match and combine to make a satisfying meal, right? So how does that link to innovation? Just like our levels of hunger varies, the climate impacts are not uniform. Some places are going to be hitting a lot more harder than other places. The impacts themselves are going to be increasing in severity and frequency as we move towards the end of the century. So what do we need to do? We will need to innovate. We need to use the ingredients that we have, or the approaches, and we need to mix and match and combine these approaches to tackle the future uncertainties that we're dealing with. That brings us to the question, what is innovation anyway? I have seen it a lot more ever since I started working on this guidance, but also I am an expecting mom to be in August, and thank you. And I cannot help but notice seeing innovative labeled on baby products and diapers, and not that the world of pregnancy isn't intimidating and daunting enough, seeing the innovativeness labeled on everything is just a whole another can of worms that we're not getting into tonight. But for our work here, what we did find was in all the definitions that we reviewed for innovation, there were 3 consistent attributes to it. And these were novelty, that the innovation has to be a novel idea. It was about value, so it adds value to the field. And it was about process, that innovation is a process and not just an outcome or a product. With that, we proposed this definition in our guidance, which is innovation is the process of creating value, and by developing and implementing those novel solutions to climate adaptation challenges. So the pathways, what innovation is, where does it come from? It comes from truly novel ideas. It comes from transfer of those ideas from one field to another. And then it comes from revived ideas from our traditional and ancestral knowledge. My husband, when I was sharing this presentation, gave me a great example of the cars or the horse carriages. So the horse carriages themselves is a truly novel idea. But then we applied it and converted the idea to cars. That is the revival of that novel approach into a new idea. And then the transfer of that idea to other fields with electric cars and so many new advancements in the cars is just an example of how innovation is transferring and moving along for just one product. But of course, this applies to so many different fields as well. Drivers of innovation, what really drives innovation? So we talk about these 4 different forces that are working in tandem, these push and pull forces. So the push forces are the advances in science and technology that open up pathways for new products or approaches that did not have an existing market. And then the user pull forces are the demand that the customers and the audiences are creating. So both of these forces work in this dynamic tension for innovation to move forward. And then similarly, we have the top-down and bottom-up approaches, where top-down we have this flow of resources and investments going towards innovative ideas, and then bottom-up is where we have the individuals who are leveraging those ideas for innovation to move forward. The innovation life cycle. So innovation is an intentional process among organizations, among research entities, and natural resource managers. And we provide this broad framework of how it really moves from an idea to an actually implemented and adopted concept. So the first phase is the problem exploration and ideation. This is this open brainstorming ideation phase where you generate all the good ideas that you can think of. Then we have the screening and refinement. So this is where the new ideas are tested for their effectiveness, for their feasibility, and also the benefits and co-benefits they're providing to the ecosystems, to the biodiversity, as well as the communities that depend on them. This is where a lot of ideas die, so that's where you see that valley of death, even the good ones, just because there's not enough resources or organizational commitment for innovation to move forward. The ideas that do move forward, they go to that phase 3 of implementation and phase 4 of diffusion and adoption, where they get adopted and widely scaled up by the communities of practice. Barriers to innovation, the institutional one. This might be preaching to the core, but they are deep-rooted in our organizational culture, risk aversion, unsupportive institutional culture, lack of incentives, or just the regulatory and policy landscape that makes it really difficult for innovation to happen. We have the knowledge and learning barriers. There might be just limited knowledge or resistance to new ideas. There's also this need for seeing more and more evidence for effectiveness, which is particularly concerning for climate adaptation, which is a new field in itself and where we do not have the data and the monitoring done for the effectiveness. And then the poor knowledge transfer, both between the fields and across sectors as well. Social barriers, operating in silos, lack of diversity, not bringing in enough people to the table, the power dynamics and conflicting values of different groups. And then the capacity barrier. Of course, they're not as easy as they sound, but lack of time, limited financial capacity, as well as human capacity. I have been told that I'm too optimistic for a climate scientist, so I'm always thinking about the solutions. So even when we talk about barriers, we immediately need to move the conversation towards how really we move towards enabling and moving past some of those hindrances that we've just talked about. So the institutional one, we need more committed leaders and a culture of trust established. We need leaders who are nimble and adaptive, who are open to taking risks and are outcome focused. Okay, your boss might not be this guy, but I do have a better example from Alaska. This is a case study that we reviewed for our guidance. This is based on the Alaskan National Wildlife Refuge called the Yukon National Wildlife Refuge, where the permafrost, particularly the Sedona permafrost, which traps 10 times more greenhouse gases than other permafrost, has been getting thawed due to the fires. So this is essentially a fire management, fire suppression strategy that the National Wildlife Refuge adopted. And fire suppression in itself is not a new strategy, but the way that the refuge functioned really had some innovative thinking and leadership came up to the front in the management of the permafrost. So what we had was, there was committed leaders and a culture of trust. The refuge managers and ecologists, they were very open to two-way communications about what the problem was to the permafrost and then opening doors for different stakeholders to discuss the solutions. They were open to taking risks. They understood that taking no action might lead to irreversible loss of this important natural asset and understand the value in taking timely action to it. And then they were nimble and adaptive. So Alaska's fire management and planning process, it's very iterative in nature, and they would continuously reach out to land managers asking if they would want any updates in their fire management approaches. So just a combination of how good institutional enabling conditions can come together and protect a natural resource that has so much, not just the climate adaptation, but also the mitigation benefits. The knowledge and learning barriers, what we need to overcome those barriers is novel insights. We need diverse perspectives across different sectors and different individuals. And we need to be continuously learning. We need more commitment to evidence gathering through regular monitoring and evaluation. This example is from Chesapeake Bay. The Blackswater Marsh on Chesapeake Bay has been eroding due to sea level rise. And the innovation here is that The National Wildlife Refuge Managers led this coalition with nonprofits and other federal agencies to create a Blackwater 2100 plan, which included a list of projects for marsh, for enabling marsh growth, as well as tackling sea level rise and protecting the at-risk species in there. They had really good, strong, novel insights. One example is the thin layer placement project, where they sprayed sediments on the marsh. This was very scientifically heavily backed up with research and technology. They have varied expertise and diverse perspectives through the coalition. And then it was a continuously learning process. So if one of the projects did not work, they ended up shutting it down and finding that it wasn't providing the biodiversity benefits it intended to. They were open to taking a step back and reassessing that. The capacity barriers, of course, you need sufficient resources and you need appropriate expertise. This is an example from the Tasmanian wilderness habitat. They have, amongst a lot of good things, they ended up creating Tasmanian wildlife management plan, where they had a lot of innovative approaches identified in the project. But the best thing about this was that they had sufficient resources. The management area was listed as a World Heritage Site, so Australia was able to dedicate a lot of resources and funding towards this. As we wrap it up, I do want to emphasize that innovation is best supported by a dynamic interplay between creative and insightful individuals and supportive institutions that nurture and promote creativity. It cannot be just myself or yourself, but it does require groups and organizations and agencies to come together to create that innovative mindset and innovation, the culture of innovation for innovation to happen. It requires you think differently and act differently. This is an example from Sequoia National Forest. This is one of the largest trees by volume, and just shows how firefighters are wrapping it by foil to protect it from fire. Some of the key things that we had to conclude in our guidance, and I won't go too much into it. I do want to leave some mystery, so I want to make sure that you all read the guidance, but making sure that you examine assumptions, you shift perspectives as needed, look at the whole system, embrace diversity, be collaborative, this one's my favorite, learn from failure, be experimental, and put risks in perspective, sharing what gets learned, not just the good, successful stories, but also the failures, because that is the pathway for innovation as well. With that, thank you so much for giving me your time today. These are my contact details. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pathak. Anytime you can slip in a slide with Michael Scott and reference the Valley of Death, that sold me for sure. But a lot of good ideas do go to die if you don't have the right support, so that was really valuable to hear, and thank you for sharing. So next, we're going to have Dr. Alex Deegan come up to the podium. Alex has worked on wildlife conservation, international development, and foreign policy in settings as diverse, I love this one, as Saddam Hussein's pool house in Iraq, the western reaches of the Himalayas in post-conflict Afghanistan, the leech and predator-filled rainforests of Madagascar, Central America and South America, so they're all leech and predator-filled, and in the chaos of post-Soviet Russia and Central Asia. So you get the sense he tends to work and run in places that have wicked problems and very difficult challenges, which really, really makes his day. But at present, he's the CEO of Conservation X Labs, as well as Professor of Sustainability in the Global Futures Laboratory at Arizona State University. He's held many prior roles with a lot of esteem, so apologies in advance for abbreviating. But I'll reference former role as Chief Scientist of USAID, also with the rank of Assistant Administrator, and he created the agency's DARPA for Development program. He holds a PhD in evolutionary biology from the University of Chicago, a JD from the University of California, Hastings College of Law, and a BS with distinction from Duke University. And he told me he only has 200 slides, so this should be quick. Alex, please come up.
Thank you so much. What I love about being here is this is one of the venues where the audience is more impressive than the speakers, and there's so many good friends and so many incredible explorers and so many committed conservationists that are here. So it is an honor to be here. I'm a member of the Explorers Club. Conservation X Labs is a member of the IUCN. And Natalie Cash is one of my dearest friends, so it's even more of a treat that she is here. If you know Natalie, you know that she's a firecracker. I'm gonna do this quick because she said, look, you have to really go fast through the 200 slides. And I didn't tell her it was 250, but the Conservation X Labs, just so you know, is essentially a Bell Labs for conservation, right? And our focus is revolutionary over evolutionary, right? We got to increase the speed and the scale of what we're trying to do for conservation. And we do that in two ways, right? We build things ourselves, build technologies ourselves, and second is we use open innovation, prizes, challenges, prototyping competitions to do that. And so we've supported, I think the number is now 142 innovations from 70 countries on 6 continents. We've given them about $12 million of our own funding. We don't have a ton of funding, but that's about a third of what we have that we've given to support others. We help lots of people raise money, but we've helped these companies raise $315 million more. 46% are still active. And we think those are good odds for companies, for innovations that we've supported in building the field of conservation tech. I didn't have time to kind of talk about all the cool stuff we're doing, so I really want to talk about 3 really big bets that we are doing now, and I think they're important. The first one really got birthed through the pandemic, and it was really this question of how do we actually prevent future pandemics through conservation? How do we think about conservation as a global health solution? And we all remember this terrible thing, but the problem is it's not the first pathogen, it's not the first pandemic that we have gone through, and it will not be the last. They're increasing, they're emerging at faster and faster rates. The interactions between humans and wildlife and animals and our own misuse of nature is actually accelerating the emergence of emerging infectious diseases. And it is fundamentally, we are selecting for rapid changes in pathogen evolution through habitat fragmentation, through wildlife trade, through climate change, through environmental pollution. And those are creating opportunities for spillover. Spillover between wildlife, domestic animals, and humans. Nipah, if you may remember, was a spillover because we set fires in Indonesia. Fruit bats moved into newly cleared date palm plantations. They started eating the date palms. The fruits fell on pigs. People started collecting those fruits to eat. It spread from bats to pigs to humans. It spread from bats to fruits to humans and led to a regional outbreak that we had. And this is not the only example that we have, right? 96% of the biomass on the planet, sadly, are humans and our livestock. And if you think back to the diseases that we know so well, that we are now seeing spread through places like Florida, cows gave us measles and TB, pigs gave us pertussis, ducks gave us influenza. Industrial farming, which is necessary to feed the planet, is actually also incubating disease, and we're creating genetic clones that allow that to happen. So if you think about the pandemic, there is a place not too far away from New York City called the Carey Institute for Ecosystem Studies. And they looked at 5,000 mammals What they found was that 2,500 of them are effective carriers of COVID. 500 of them are highly effective. And in fact, if we surveying deer in the Midwest, what we found, Penn State found, is that 40% of the deer in the Midwest have COVID. We know that our snow leopards at the Central Park Zoo died of COVID. 17% of the rats in the New York City subway have COVID. And it is believed that Omicron was a spilled back event, right? Which meant that the mutations accelerated in animals, that we pass it to animals, and then those mutations came back. So if I haven't convinced you that we actually need to think about conservation as part of our global health solutions, I hope this helps. So we started thinking, and in fact, we have Larry Wong here, Professor Wong from Brandeis University, who helped us with the conceptualization of this, of creating a handheld DNA device that allows genetic ID anywhere, anytime, by anyone. And we were lucky enough to get into Operation Warp Speed, picked up in a program called RADx, one of 40 companies out of 2,400 that were accelerated. What this allows us to do is it allows us to go into the last mile and actually look at spillover where it's happening. So because of the fact that it's battery powered, it's rugged and portable, it fits in your pocket. We've taken it skiing and run molecular assays. It's easy to use. We've designed it for a 6-year-old, and we've designed it for not just no scientific literacy, but zero literacy, for that to be able to use. And it's low cost, $5 a test at scale for us to be able to run it, and hundreds of dollars for the device, to allow us to actually look at biosurveillance, global health, to look at fish traceability. 30% of the fish that you eat is not what you think it is. If you order red snapper, 87 to 92% of the chance you're not getting one of 12 different species of red snapper that the FDA describes. So don't order the red snapper if you go out to dinner tonight, right? But also pests and pathogens in food and agriculture is one of the things we wanted to look at. We can't develop every assay ourselves, so we also developed a system. It's essentially an app store that allows other people to put assays automatically onto our device, to use AI and other tools to translate lab-based assays for our device. They own the IP, like the App Store. That's what made the iPhone a completely transformative product, or the Android. At one point, for Sony and the PlayStation, Sony made 5% of the games, 95% of the games were made by other people. 50% of Sony's worldwide income came from games made by other people. We're thinking we can use something like this to solve the neglected diagnostics problem, and be able to address some of these problems in our original hypothesis, but also now starting to think about these new pathogens. So we're working with something called the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility. It is where the next zombie apocalypse will happen. It used to be called Plum Island off of New York City. Not good to have super dangerous diseases right off of New York City and Port Jefferson and places like that. And it's now in a place called Manhattan, Kansas, known as the Little Apple. It is very little, it is very remote, and it is a place where you can bring in a horse with Ebola and do the work. And we're working with them to develop Mpox, swinepox, Nipah, Marburg, Ebola, Congo Crimean hemorrhagic fever, and coronaviruses, to do that kind of work that allows us to actually understand where spillover is happening and where conservation solutions, ideas of landscape immunity and preventive sustainability, right? We have preventive medicine. Why not preventive sustainability to reduce the risk of pandemic spillover? And there was a great paper in Science by Andy Dobson, who's at Princeton University, not too far away, that literally said, if we made these investments in conservation, the chances of having that original coronavirus COVID outbreak would have been greatly reduced. Our second bet is really, we have this goal as a global society to achieve 30 by 30. How do we do that? Right? How do we don't have enough money, and we have 10% of the money we need in conservation any given year. How do we actually give leverage to the conservationists? And so we developed a tool called Sentinel, whose intent is to make conservation smarter. And what we do is take a device that tens of thousands of conservationists use, million plus devices around the world, and they all have one thing in common, which is the memory card. So we plug into that memory card slot where those images are being saved. This is a passive camera, an animal goes in front of it, infrared sensor, it takes its picture or it takes its video. But you have to go find that card in the middle of nowhere. If there's lots of these cards, you have to go through sometimes hundreds of thousands of images. So how do we actually make this a real-time system that gives you what only you are looking for? If you're looking for a jaguar, if you're looking for a disease, if you're thinking about, if you're thinking about poachers or people cutting down the forest, or if you're thinking about behavior. And those are some of the areas that we started looking at. So we started working on, could we actually use artificial intelligence to follow the behavior of multiple animals on these systems automatically and describe them in real time. Green is our device. White is a primatologist describing the same behavior. We're following multiple animals at the same time. We started thinking about disease. Florida panthers have a disease called feline neuroleucopathy, which is devastating to an animal that went through a population bottleneck and it came down as low as 50 individuals. And so you have to eliminate these animals from the population because that population bottleneck is so small that this could be a driver to extinction. So we worked with Florida Fish and Wildlife to find it. This is a mother and her 3 cubs, and you can tell the other cub is actually walking slightly different, and the AI can pick that up, and we can remove that population from the animal from our breeding population, doing that automatically. And you can just see it one more time. So that's the mom, those are the 3 cubs, and you can tell that one is walking differently in terms of it. So we have been actually starting to distribute and deploy this technology around the world. And one of the things you'll notice is a lot of these deployments, we work on really important protected areas. We want to work on these areas we call forgotten parks that don't have the resources that some of the bigger parks like Kruger does. But we also want to start working on islands. And why do islands matter? If you look at the IUCN data list, the red list, for animals that have gone extinct, they tend to be species on the islands that have gotten hit by invasive species. So if we can help with the eradication efforts in New Zealand, in the Galapagos, going out to a place called Robinson Crusoe Island, a true explorers club, Hawaii, and help with the eradication efforts and demonstrating that these are predator-free islands, we can actually prevent against extinction, which is our mission to prevent the 6th mass extinction from happening. We can give conservationists leverage in what we're doing, and we're excited because we're seeing the number of use cases of this accelerating exponentially around the world. We're about to do Los Amigos in Peru, and we're excited about that. The other thing we developed is the ability to fly drones over the camera traps and pick up all the payloads without having to touch the camera traps within the forest. And the thing I didn't mention is we use LoRa, cellular, but the best one is we're using nanosatellites, and soon Starlink will have cellular on their satellites for us to be able to have. It is not just getting that information but it's getting that information in near real time, so you can actually make use of the information. The AI automatically processes what you're looking for and then sends it up, and you don't need to know a single line of code or how to actually use AI to be able to use these processes. Because if we don't democratize conservation tech, we won't be successful. I just came back from Brazil last week, and this is really how we've been thinking about the 3rd big bet. And I want to give a thanks to Luis Fernandez and a call out who will be, can you stick your hand up, Luis? Just like, not only is he handsome and really an amazing foodie, but he is also an amazing conservationist. He's going to be speaking tomorrow night on artisanal scale gold mining and his work around the world. And he's part of the reason that we started working in the Amazon. So it's your fault, Luis. It's your fault. And this is really the question that we have. The Amazon is anywhere from 3 to 17 years away from tipping. What does that mean? That means you cut enough of the trees that there's no more transpiration, so the water doesn't return to the atmosphere, and it stops raining. That is bad for the planet. it's bad for everything we're doing. The Amazon is a really important part of our planet, of our ecosystems, and you know, we are trying to address this question: how do we stop that tipping from happening? And this is kind of where some of this started. Los Amigos protected area, Madre de Dios province in Peru. This is the heart of the Andes Amazon complex. Some of the highest numbers of species of bats and rats in the world are at the slopes of the Andes down to these lowland forests. And it's beautiful forest. And Luis then took me here. And this is La Pampa. This was, and I'm going to get the statistics wrong, so correct me tomorrow, but 30,000 miners in 3 years clearing 15,000 hectares. This is 1/3 water, and this process of amalgamating the gold that has washed down from the mountains in these ancient riverbeds alongside these rivers is the #1 source of mercury pollution in the world, and it's having a devastating effect. But the challenge is, and the challenge is, this gold is getting into the biggest companies in America and around the world. And it is using the same intermediary organizations involved in trafficking in weapons, wildlife, drugs, in terms of what we're doing. So because of Luis, and in partnership with Luis, we launched a challenge to transform the process of artisanal mining. These are some of the innovations that came through that process. But then we started thinking about the larger question, right? What is driving this deforestation? Most of it is driven for things like cattle farming, really low productivity cattle farming. And we realized that we need to switch from economies of the past based on extraction to economies of the future based on regeneration that value standing forests. And in particular, where can we actually think about the forest as a genetic library to create the replacements for alternative protein and new forms of fiber and new forms of material? So we've been working, including with indigenous communities, through working with them to set up license agreements for their traditional knowledge so revenue comes back. They have a step in governance, that they have a voice in this process to be able to develop these new products out of the Amazon, to add value in a way that beats the price of cattle farming per hectare, that beats the price of soy per hectare in terms of what we're doing. We've been working with Brazilian VCs, with large Brazilian banks like Santander, with groups like Serchi that are looking at how to train the next generation of entrepreneurs to be able to do these, and organizations and collectives of indigenous communities and other communities. This is my last slide, and it's the last thing I'll say. I guess I won't do the 250 slides, I'm sorry. But I think this is kind of the most exciting thing that is happening right now, is a revolution in nature tech that is starting to influence corporate behavior. And I've been a conservationist, probably since I was 14. So for 40 years, now you know how old I am, but for 40 years I've been doing this. I started on the ancient forests of the Pacific Northwest. And for too long, conservation is a small stream on the side of the Mississippi, and the Mississippi is the economy. But we're now seeing through something called TNFD, the task force for nature-related voluntary disclosures that hundreds of companies have signed up for because of climate, involuntary transparency measures that are putting pressures on companies and their supply chains, new technologies that allow us to actually understand the impact on those supply chains by those companies, that we're seeing a revolution that I think, and we're partners with Nature for Climate, the Nature Tech Collective. We're setting up something called a Nature Tech Venture Studio. We work with Superorganism, which was one of our co-founders it was created through Conservation X Labs, and one of the co-founders was one of our community manager, and we're really excited. The first biodiversity venture fund. We're seeing this growth of this industry that gives me deep hope for the future, because we can actually change the things that put pressure on national parks and our systems. Thank you.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Alex. And so much to unpack, but it's really scary with the Amazon in particular, and a lot of studies have shown we have exceeded the tipping point. So now the Amazon that was a source or a sink is now a source. So contributing more CO2 than helping to sequester it. And the ability of the private sector to really start picking up some of these, and the Task Force for Financial Disclosure and others, and there are, like you said, hundreds of companies that have taken on their own commitments, and this is what's going to affect change. The policy making is good, but it's slow. And governments, so we saw in Brazil that one change in president, actually now maybe we will have the ability to avoid, yes, ojalá. But lots to unpack, but we have two more excellent speakers, so I don't want to cut off their time. So now we're going to hear a bit about the plant world. So next we're going to hear from Dr. Ashley Beckwith. She's the founder and CEO of 4A Bioscience, which is a startup focused on protecting and restoring forest resources within biomanufacturing. Beckwith holds a PhD in mechanical engineering from MIT and has spent her career innovating at the intersection of materials, manufacturing, and biology. Her PhD research in lab-grown plant materials was awarded the MIT MTL Doctoral Dissertation Seminar Award. Beckwith is an active recipient of the Activate Fellowship for Technical Entrepreneurs and is currently leading the 4A Bio team to advance plant biotechnology and improve its utility in commercial production and conservation. So, Dr. Beckwith, please take the floor.
Thank you. Wow, I feel a bit like an outlier up here. I don't have a long history in conservation, but it's so inspiring to hear the stories of others. And as a newbie to this world, I'm excited to sort of offer up our thoughts and some of the technologies that we're developing for potential collaborations in the future. So 2 years ago, I founded 4A in order to address what I perceive to be some impending and terrifying realities that faced our forest resources. And year to year, we see our forests are in decline, and that manifests not just as a loss of acreage, but as a loss of biodiversity. And despite, our best efforts and commitments, from my perspective, my vantage point as an engineer, I didn't see how modern approaches and modern technologies were going to be able to turn the tides and allow us to reverse course. And so it was clear that we needed new tech and new technologies to be able to address these new challenges and these growing challenges. And that's why 4A was born. So at 4A, we're deploying those new tools and building those new tools from the ground up with a mission to protect and restore forests with biomanufacturing. So our tech is based on natural biology. We leverage tree cells themselves and will ultimately enable us to cut down fewer trees and plant more of them. So really, I don't need to tell anyone here that trees are critical to our ecological well-being, but they're also absolutely fundamental to our economy and our way of life. I know we're sitting here in the concrete jungle, but if I could hazard a guess, I would bet that every one of you has come into contact with more than one tree today. You might have, climbed out of bed from your sheets that were made from the regenerated cellulose of wood pulp. Maybe you shampooed your hair with a tea tree oil product, moisturized your face with a lotion that gets its luscious texture from nanocellulose. And maybe because you were coming to this wonderful event tonight, you spritzed yourself with some balsam perfume. And maybe you popped an aspirin because you had a wild night last night. I don't know. But we haven't even made it to breakfast, and I think you could see my point that trees have infiltrated every aspect of our lives, and we need them. We depend on them, and yet the challenge we face is that we need new solutions that can help us address these critical squeezes, this vice grip that our forests are in today. And so that's why 4A is developing this technology that can allow us to both plant more trees and cut down fewer. So the challenge as we see it from our vantage point is that, our forests are under immense pressure. They face, environmental stressors on one side, and then on the other side, there's our human propensity to love their products a little bit too much. And, so today, in 2022, I guess this isn't today anymore, time flies, but in 2022, the world saw a decline in acreage of forests by 16 million. And that's a trend that continues, year after year. And so on one hand, you have this climate that's changing faster than our trees can adapt. You have an increasing onslaught of pests and pathogens attacking these resources and making it really difficult for them to recover and regenerate. And then you have us. And as a society, I think many of us have sort of rallied and we're focused on engaging and incorporating more sustainable practices in our lives. We're pivoting away from fossil fuel-based products, but in doing so, we're also layering on another set of demands onto these already strained natural resources. And so that's really where this versatile biomanufacturing technology that we're building comes into play. And so at 4A, we're focused on building, treeless tree products that enable us to protect the trees we have and also support the restoration of the trees that we don't. We're calling this practice precision forestry because we harness the power of the trees from a cellular level. And you may have heard of lab-grown meat, the steak without the cow, and in a similar way, we can cultivate these tree cells outside of the whole organism, and we can steer those to a variety of useful end cases. So I'll just describe a bit about how it works, but I brought some tree cells with me today, so if you care to find me afterwards, I'd be happy to introduce you. So how this process works, we begin by taking a biopsy from a tree specimen of interest. This is a non-sacrificial, non-harmful to the organism itself. And using our database-driven platform technology, we're able to quickly develop a process that allows us to isolate those cells from that tree biopsy and cultivate an environment that allows those cells to thrive outside of the organism. And once we do that, we can grow and proliferate those cells basically indefinitely. And these cells are really special, really unique, very dexterous. They're both stem cells in the sense that they come from stems, but also, thank you. But they also, of course, have this great potential to become many things. They have all the biomachinery and the equipment that trees themselves have. And we just need to figure out how to tap into that. And that's what we're doing with our technology platform. And so there are several use cases that we leverage these cell lines for. First, we're creating a biobank. There are many species for which traditional banking is just not feasible. The plants are too recalcitrant, or the seeds can't be maintained in a traditional bank facility. And this is a valuable alternative to those traditional approaches and can complement and augment our conservation resources in that sense. We also use these cells as green factories. In that we can engage their internal machinery to produce important medicines and materials and fragrances that we use in every aspect of our lives, and create those products in a treeless format, allowing us to then reduce the risk of overexploitation as a result of the use of these products. And then finally, we can actually use these cells to regenerate the organism itself. So using high throughput methods, we can we can leverage these cells as a new seed production system to help us fill this gap that exists, this massive deficit that's hindering our abilities to effectively reforest these many landscapes that are in need of support. And so, I guess today we're looking for partners whose conservation goals we can support and amplify. And so I just have a few asks for the people in this room. First, we're building this biobank, and we want it to be a useful resource across conservation and production. So if you have access to unique biologies that could benefit from this type of biobanking, let's talk, let's get involved, and maybe we can find a way to bank your trees. The second ask I would have is, we're working on developing, and we've already demonstrated the production of some of these treeless tree products. We're looking to help others develop sustainable product lines. So if you are looking to bring new innovative approaches to your production lines, we'd love to chat and see how we can support your development. And then finally, as we are working towards the scalable seed solution, we want to be able to support reforestation efforts in a meaningful way, and that requires us to understand on the ground, what are your needs, what seeds do you need, and how can we help you get them? So we recognize that we're one technology, we're one piece of a very complex puzzle, as you've seen tonight, but we're very excited to build impactful conservation solutions with all of you. So thank you very much.
Oh, this is phenomenal. I'm enjoying myself immensely. I hope you all are as well. And that's really cool to know that there's this new technology. And I was just actually listening to a podcast about synthesized palm oil. So there's a company now who's found out a way to do that. And this could really be a game changer, because palm oil can only be grown between 5 and 10 degrees of the equator. So it's laying waste to much of the tropical rainforest there. And so the idea that these things are out there, and that's super exciting. So invitation accepted on certainly where we want the tree banks. So where do we want to do this? Yes. So my organization alone works in 63 countries. So very happy to think about that, and as well as thinking about how we can connect you to investors and other partners. So thank you for that. It was great. So we had on the agenda 5 speakers, but now it's good that we only have 4 because we're a little behind. But I'm sorry, Jason, that you have the last slot, but let's please still give him our attention. Jason Holberg has logged thousands of hours of development time as the Wild Me Lab's original information architect, helping marine and terrestrial scientists across the globe track individual animals and populations. So using Jason's tools, projects have been able to categorize and manage a large amount of wildlife data, promote collaboration across borders and data sets, and identify individual animals from multiple photos taken by different researchers many years apart. So this is next-gen stuff. Jason was the population modeler for 2 widely lauded papers covering whale shark population trajectories at Ningaloo Marine Park in Western Australia. As Conservation X Lab's Chief Data Officer, Jason is currently working to teach AI, basically the AI, how to universally distinguish between individual animals of many species, including sea dragons, leopards, dolphins, sharks, hyenas, and more. So Jason, please share with us your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jason Holmberg. I'm the director of Wild Me, which is a lab under Conservation X Labs. I'm also its chief data officer. If you think about the Wild Me lab, we're engineers. There are no biologists, no ecologists on staff. We are 8 giant wildlife nerds who then also moonlight as software and machine learning professionals. We support 1,800 wildlife biologists, marine and terrestrial, across the globe in their desire to study and protect wildlife populations, anywhere from little leafy and weedy sea dragons in Australia to giraffe, whales, snow leopards, etc. We are the engineers who want to back up their research. I need to go back to that slide. There we go. Okay. I can also just talk out loud if that's causing a problem. I wanted to give you a DALL-E slide. I started doing prompts in DALL-E in Midjourney, and I wanted to give this really awesome, like, how are machines and humans working together? And I generated maybe 15 or 20 prompts, probably getting both those platforms to hate me if they are intelligent, and I hated everything they produced. 3 reasons. One, they were derivative. Clearly, the visuals were derived from corporate slideware, which is all over the internet, and they really sort of lied about the complexity of wildlife conservation, the complexity of human and artificial intelligence interaction. I hated that they were unscalable. Every one of them gave me this beautiful picture of a drone and a human, and it seemed like we were these one-on-one partners working together, and that too is wrong. There are only so many humans, there are only so many drones, and how can we have this one-on-one partnership? Think about AI. What about an AI that's trained on the knowledge and experience of 20 individuals? Are we really equal partners in this journey? And third, in this beautiful sort of corporate-y picture that I was going to show you, and I'm thankful I didn't, they really lied about the actual complexity of wildlife research and gave me just far too simplistic of a vision that doesn't match what our actual journey using AI in production is at WildMe. Importantly, that actual journey is inexplicable. We produce neural networks that are bad at describing why they're so accurate. They don't give me pretty pictures, even if they give me the right answer. They, in fact, make me uncomfortable in what they know and what they can do. So uncomfortable that I'm not being pushed outside my comfort zone. I'm running outside of it as fast as possible. In fact, I find myself, after 20 years, looking at the scalability of AI and the developments in the past 6 to 12 months, I honestly am before you feeling refreshed and much more hopeful than I've ever been, because up until this point, I've felt like conservation is a journey I'm on that isn't quite scalable enough to get the job done. And I think we might have the partner we need. And that popped. How about this? Back one. All right, 30,000 foot view. How do we protect wildlife? We increase their numbers so the populations are growing and more healthy. How do we figure out how many we have so that we can figure out whether things are getting better? We count them. WildMe operates in 2 different ways. One is aerial surveys. Fly drones, fly planes, count the animals you see. Only there's a problem in that counting elephants in Africa, the state of the art is called rear seat observers. If that sounds like people sitting in a plane in the back, you're exactly right. It's 2 people with clipboards looking out the side. Despite digital photography, cameras, video, that is the accepted state of the art in counting elephants. There's another way, in addition to aerial surveys and counting, called marker capture. If you've ever seen a tag on a deer's ear, invasive and really makes me uncomfortable tag on a sea turtle's flipper, a band on a bird also makes me a little uncomfortable because that's actually weight. It's invasive, it's on the animal, then you know what a marker capture study is. The idea is we go out into the wild and we tag animals and we then record year on year whether those animals show up or whether they disappear. Problem is it's invasive, it can cause infection, and it's interruptive. And interestingly enough, the downstream statistics that tell us how many animals do we have are literally based on scarcity. They're literally based on the idea that a professor goes out 2 weeks a year, observes all the deer, comes back, and does that 5 years in a row and creates a population model. Problem is, we live in the world of digital photography, citizen science, all these platforms that can collect continuous data. We literally don't have the statistics to keep up with the volume of data that we can collect. And if we go back to this very naive idea of humans and AI working side by side, we don't have the humans to verify or the AI to verify the human decisions. We can't work in tandem. However, the good news is that we do have people like myself, like the engineers at WildMe, who are looking at applying computer vision and AI to study wildlife. My own journey begins photographing and tagging whale sharks, adapting a spot matching algorithm that was originally designed from the Hubble Space Telescope to map and overlay star patterns or photographs or mosaics of the night sky. This basic star pattern matching algorithm can be used to match photographs of a whale shark might live 60 to 120 years, match them over many years across the photographs of many individuals, across migration routes and data sets. This initial project showed that we can start using at least basic computing, computer vision, to speed and scale and promote collaboration for a species. However, what I've shown you up to date was itself pretty much a deceit. Remember those pretty pink boxes around elephants? That is not how actual aerial survey work goes. This is an honest-to-goodness 400-foot elevation aerial survey photograph looking for African elephants. If you can see the tiny yellow boxes in the corner, those are the actual elephants. Thank God there are a few human experts in Africa who can figure those out after reviewing hundreds and thousands of photographs. AI can find those. An inexpert like myself could not. However, this is an example of how hard real-world computer vision can be. Or how about the opposite problem? Caribou in Alaska. We've gone from the Kaza elephant survey where 95% of the photographs have no elephants, and then we find elephants under trees and they're really hard to find and they look a lot like rocks, to, oh my God, it's like fleas on my dog. It's a little bit better than that, but this is an incredible array. How would a human even begin to count this? Putting dots on the photograph? This too is an example of a real-world data problem. How about this one? Do your best guess to figure out how many zebra are in this photograph. Is it 12, 10, 14? I honestly think we could have a very interesting discussion. But it gets worse. Because not only is it hard to figure out where one zebra begins and ends, or even how many there are, I need to individually identify them from a cluster of 30,000 other photographs. Again, how does a human even do this? Well, we can begin applying computer vision. This is what we do at WildMe. This is why we have software and machine learning engineers working in conservation. We can draw bounding boxes around animals, train artificial intelligence to then begin processing that. Nice thing about AI, doesn't tire, doesn't get exhausted. It does have error, just like humans, but it mostly inherits that error from us. It can run day and night, find spotted dolphins, find humpback whales, find right whales at various perspectives. We can teach it to do things like label left versus right. We can teach it to label species and do a process that we at WildMe call detection. Find the animal, label the species and the viewpoint. But then we take it one step farther because importantly, we need to identify individuals to track these populations. And we need to track those individuals over time, and we need to track them across multiple catalogs, across researchers across borders, from citizen scientists, et cetera. So we do something called re-ID, or individual identification. This is what the CIA does with facial recognition. Only at WildMe we do it for 50+ species and not just one. Sorry. I needed to dig at the CIA. Here's the problem. This is an old world computer vision result. It's very explainable. You can see the yellow on these two different photographs of the same wild dog, and if you look closely at the black and white Rorschach-like patterning underneath, you can kind of see a trident and some other shapes, and it's very relatable. I understand why this old world computer vision algorithm, which takes about 5 minutes to run across a few thousand photographs, I understand why it made that decision. But this is old school. This is not AI. It's just matching pixels and doing a few clever things. But it's not the newer generation. Now, I'm going to get to why the newer generation is weird, so hold that thought about that wild dog. But one of the problems with what I've just shown you is those are visualizations. AI is actually delivered to researchers often as papers and code, none of which has been hardened, none of which is ready to actually be put in the hands of a biologist who does not know any Python, for example. So one of the things we do at WildMe is we pair the AI with the software user interface to make sure that this is actually usable by field practitioners. We also build these online platforms called Wildbooks, which means let's put the AI in a platform where you can log in your browser, you can run detection and individual re-ID, And you can do it collaboratively. Common data model, common submission portal, the ability to compare individuals across data sets and borders. We also, especially in our aerial survey work, have gotten to the point where people don't trust the AI, even if the AI is built on the data that they gave us. So, in this weird interim step where we don't trust the AI, but we're still building the AI, we develop these user interfaces to put human decisions and AI decisions side by side, so that ultimately, and here you're looking at elephants again, on the right is the AI task, on the left is the human annotations of the same, looking for individual elephants. We're at this weird, awkward point where we've got to get humans to start trusting the AI as we're trying to build better and better AI. But without that trust, nobody's going to use it. Here's where it starts getting really weird, though. Our newer deep learning techniques can actually match individuals much more accurately. The problem is they won't tell me why. So whereas before, I gave you these pretty yellow maps on the side of African wild dogs that were very relatable. I could see why you made that decision and told me out of 5,000 African wild dogs, it's this one, right? Look at the comparable maps, which, to be quite honest with you, are nothing more. They're heat maps, evidently. It's called GradCam, but they're really nothing more than pretty rainbows on pictures. Now, the interesting thing is the AI made the right decision. It matched P22 from a field of others. It matched a Pacific white-sided dolphin. It matched a beluga. It made the right decision. And then when I asked it why, it fell down. And it won't tell me why. Here's the even more interesting thing. All of these decisions were made in a multi-species model, which means I'm not training an AI for an African wild dog, and then another AI, another unscalable project for just a cougar, another unscalable project for just a Pacific white-sided dolphin. I took 40 plus species and put them into a single AI model. And I said, here are individuals, marine, terrestrial, the sides of giraffe, the sides of African wild dogs, fins, flukes, faces. You figure it out. And it did. And for every single species, or almost, let's say 95% of the species, the AI was more accurate by learning across species than it was if we only trained it on that species. What does this mean? We're giving it a bunch of weird examples. It's coming up with the right response and the right answer more often because it's seen other examples. One of the interesting things in conservation, we're beginning to understand that we don't understand the AI systems we're building. This 40 plus species AI system was built on the expertise of multiple whale, dolphin, African wild dog, snow leopard researchers. This is an assimilation of experience. It's not just a technical thing, it's actually an assimilation of what people know, their careers, and it can be passed on to others in the field. Only, who am I to challenge the decisions of an expert? This is where AI begins to get uncomfortable. It's faster, it's based on data sets that I can't even scalably review. So I might need to train another AI to ask that AI whether this AI is right. I'm not even joking, that's being discussed in my lab. So long story short, this is the work we're doing at WildMe. AI is making me enthusiastic because it is a scalable partner. The only weird thing about it, it's going to get through data faster, it's going to assimilate more data. I don't know what our role will be when it begins to eclipse our decision making. How do we even tell it it's wrong? Do we even have the expertise? And these are the weird, awkward questions that I can't explain in a simple Dolly photograph that we're facing day to day at WildMe. And this is why, after 20 years of working in conservation, thinking, how does this scale? I can't do all the species if I'm doing a project that takes 2 months. I can only do 6 projects a year. All of a sudden, I'm seeing a partner that is scaling, that is moving fast enough that maybe we can make a difference. So I want to hopefully end with AI is going to make it weird. It's going to be fun. And I hope you'll join us in the journey at WildMe.
I think confirming all of our suspicions that computers are in fact taking over the universe. No, but that was amazing, and it makes sense to me that they'd be moving at the light speed of light, assimilating all this knowledge, understanding nobody can look at that much data at the same time. So it makes perfect sense, and it is a little scary. But these are the ethics and the discussions that we need to have and think about with what we're interpreting. But we have to move fast. If we don't move fast, the species will go extinct. So we need to look at all of these tools together and see what we can do to stay ahead of the crisis. So thank you, everyone. We don't have time for the actual questions, but I just, first of all, want to thank our panelists. Round of applause, please. That was really, really interesting. And thank you to the Explorers Club and also our sponsors, so co-sponsors. So IUCN, we helped with this event, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, and Global Choices. So we're all kind of partners in today and tomorrow. I hope that some of you are coming back for tomorrow night, because this is the second piece of the inaugural Global Conservation Forum. And now I think our esteemed hostess with the mostest, Bonnie, wants to do a bit of a close, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you very much.
So in an effort to become more sustainable, the club is giving you QR codes. Outside, you can see, and downstairs on the table that checked you in, there are sheets with QR codes for each of the sites that all the speakers belong to and studies that they have done, so you can do more research on your own. So thank you all again. Thank the panelists. Thank you, our sponsors. And we hope to see you tomorrow.